Om Swastiastu. Hello students, welcome to another classes for English course in Architecture Department. For today's meeting, I will introduce you to what is the design process in architecture. So first of all, I want to remind you about the definition of architecture. So the architecture is cover for the design process. It's cover all of the steps that an architect needs to go through, from the first meeting with the client to discuss the requirement, to the first sketch drawing, to the final construction plan for the creation of the new building. So the design process for architecture is very complicated. It's a long journey, and it consists from the first step is to meet the client, and the last one is to the construction. Whenever it be drawing up floor plan or blueprints, a company's design development process should remain consistent across all tasks and team members. So the consistency steps of the design process is very important in the design process for architecture. There are at least 5 design phase for architecture design process. The first is pre-design phase or programming. This is what makes architect different from artists. So that we create programming first, and then the second phase is schematic design. The third is design development. The fourth is construction drawing, and the last is construction administration. This is the steps that you should do, you should take to create architecture buildings. For instance, the first step is pre-design phase or programming. At this stage, the architect and the client can work together to create a briefing. With the research conducted, the knowledge gained from it on hand to refer back to throughout the remainder of the process, the architect is well equipped to fulfill the client expectation. Some of the term that is used, that is architecture, or an architect doesn't create product, it creates process. It contains the process meeting with client to discuss what the clients need, and to take the middle steps to summary it, to ensure the client need is you can achieve by your design. The second phase is schematic design. So the architect assembles these initial ideas into design for the building that fulfill the client requirements. So after the programming, you can do initial ideas, you can collect initial ideas, and then you can create the design that meet the client requirement. To start off the design process, the schematic design phase requires the architect to create a rough sketch of the building. It's the earliest stage for sketching. This will illustrate the first proposal for the new project. The schematic design drawing should allow the architect idea to take shape while serving as a flexible basis for alternative ideas and finalized decision. To better communicate with the client, the architect should ensure that the schematic design phase includes an effective review and approval process. So in schematic design, architect creates the rough sketch that is collected by the initial ideas before, and then the ideas that the sketch should include the review and approval process. This is when you should not finalize your drawing, because the drawing may be will be changed by the clients or the requirement from the surrounding and so on. The third is design development. So once the first round of client feedback has been incorporated into the building plans, the second phase, the schematic design, after the client is giving feedback to your design through your sketches, you can proceed into the design development. It is when your drawing and specification become more detailed and encrypted. The previous drawing is aimed in accordance with the client's feedback, and the client's final approval will be taken to the next step of the process. But in design development phase, a more detailed three-dimensional drawing of the building is created as the ideas of the architect evolve. So this is when your three-dimensional design is created. This drawing should give idea substance through a far more realistic illustration. It should demonstrate that the project is indeed fully considered and entirely possible to create. So this is when the realistic of the design is created. The fourth phase is the construction drawing. This is when the architect creates construction drawing out of the final design. After the final drawing is done, you should do a construction drawing. This highly technical drawing will be used by the building contractor, and they will be submitted for the request of a permit. So the construction drawing is needed for the permit. Throughout this drawing, the architect is able to communicate proposed plan to any outside stakeholders who may become involved at this stage. The drawing also contains a detailed description of the structural and interior components of the property. Throughout this step, the advice and expertise of other individuals is essential. Therefore, the architect will regularly converse with consultant and the client, of course, regarding matters such as the interior design and the plumbing or the engineering of the project. In construction drawing, even though the drawing is final, you should listen more about the stakeholders, the other stakeholders. For instance, for the plumbing or for the site engineering, you should discuss the design with them in this construction drawing. But the construction drawing is before the construction drawing, the drawing is final. They cannot change your drawing unless it's very crucial, it's very important to change it. And the last phase of the design process for the architect is the construction administration. So throughout this step, the architect will monitor the building's construction, visiting the site in person to ensure that the work taking place is fully accordance with the information outlined in the construction document. In this role, they are also responsible for ensuring that the construction standard contracts are fully administered. By overseeing the progress on the building site, the architect can be certain that the project exactly fulfills all the client's requirements. So this is when the architect is taking the site visit to ensure that the implication of the drawing, the building, is exactly as in the drawing. So you can hear me that I am saying engineer in my previous lecture. Who is engineer? Engineer is where architect meet one or more in addition to the architect teams. Engineers is the person who is responsible for ensuring that the finished product of the construction project is safely and appropriately constructed. It's like a civil engineering or something like that. Engineer make sure that the project is as efficient as possible, reducing costs while maintaining necessary safety features. Engineers will also conduct an initial survey of the building site to assess feasibility for the project and get a sense of any special accommodation that may need to be made. There are three groups in this design process for architect. The first is the client, and then the second one is the engineer, and the third is the builder. So the client, from this image, you can see the picture above, is they is in all of these 5 phases, from pre-design, schematic design, design development, construction documentation, until the construction administration. The client is everywhere. So the client has its own responsibility in this phase. But engineer is only in the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th phase of the design process. And the builder is in the 4th and the 5th or the last phase. So, but architect is, of course, is in all of this process. And as you can see, they have their own tasks, they have their own responsibility, they have their own management doing in different kind of phase. So this is why you have to be able to work as groups. So you can see that many of your tasks as a student, as an architect student, is usually done by groups. It can make you more flexible to work studies in groups. I came to the summary of this architecture design process. So there are pre-design, schematic design, design development, construction documentation, and the last is construction administration. So it's a 5 design process for architect. So pre-design is scoping the project, review the program, analyze the site, and understand zoning requirement. And then we have schematic design. It translates the project requirements into technical drawings like floor plan and elevation. The third is design development. Expand schematic design to include material plus mechanical, electrical, plumbing, energy requirements, using 3D modeling and other software to formalize the design concept. The first step is construction documentation. Is when you write a comprehensive set of instructions with everything from type of doorknob to location of outlet to hand over to contractors for the build phase. The fifth is construction administration. Is when the architect visits the site and responds to requests for information until construction is completed. There are a couple of different other summary that I can conclude. The first is architect provide a service, not a product, a process. They provide a process. These services are focused on meeting the express need to the client. And the architect is a client consultant, whose role is to provide design service and assist the client in securing from the contractor a project that is generally in conformity with the architect design concept and specification. So you have to make sure that in your head, architect did not design product, but they provide a service or a process. That's it for my lecture for today. I hope you enjoy the architecture design process. Thank you for listening. See you again next week. Om Santi 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 Om.